The house felt too quiet the morning after Daniel died. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the kind that presses against your ears until you start hearing things that aren't there. The hum of the refrigerator sounded louder. The ticking clock in the hallway felt almost aggressive. Even the floorboards seemed to creak differently, like they were aware something fundamental had changed. I stood in the kitchen, staring at two mugs instead of one. His was still there, slightly chipped on the rim, the way he liked it. I hadn't moved it. I wasn't ready. 42 years of marriage doesn't disappear overnight. It lingers in objects, in routines, in the way your body still expects another presence beside you. Mia, you should eat something. Ethan's voice came from behind me. My son. My only child. I turned slowly. He looked tired, but not in the same way I felt. His exhaustion seemed temporary, surface level. Mine felt carved into my bones. I'm fine, I said, though we both knew that wasn't true. He hesitated, then nodded like he didn't want to argue. That was new. Ethan used to push, insist, worry. Now he just accepted. Behind him, Claire appeared in the doorway. Perfect posture. Perfect expression. Perfect sympathy. You really need to take care of yourself, Mia, she said softly. These next few weeks will be overwhelming. Her tone was gentle, but something in it didn't sit right with me. It was too measured, too controlled. I'll manage, I replied. She gave me a small smile, the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes. Of course you will. But as she said it, I noticed something, a glance. A quick one. Between her and Ethan. It lasted less than a second, but it was there. A silent exchange. And suddenly, I felt like I had walked into the middle of a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. The funeral had been the day before. I remembered almost nothing clearly, just fragments. Black clothing. Soft murmurs. People touching my arm, my shoulder, my hand, as if I might break if they didn't. But there was one moment that stood out with painful clarity. I had stepped outside for air. Just a minute. The room had been too heavy, too full of grief that wasn't even mine. That's when I heard them. Ethan and Claire. They were standing just around the corner, voices low but not low enough. We can't wait forever, Claire was saying. Ethan sighed. I know, but it's too soon. Too soon for what? She replied. She's not going to handle that house alone. It's huge. It's impractical. And honestly, it's falling apart. There was a pause. Then she added, almost casually, we should start looking at options. Somewhere appropriate. I froze. Ethan didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was quieter. Give it a little time. A few weeks. Claire let out a small laugh. A laugh. At my husband's funeral. Well, she said, once everything settles, we can finally do something with that place. It's such a waste right now. My chest tightened so sharply, I thought I might collapse right there. She won't agree easily, Ethan said. Claire's voice hardened just slightly. She won't have a choice if we handle it right. That was when I stepped back, silently, before they could see me. I returned to the room, stood beside Daniel's casket, and let people think my tears were only for him. But they weren't. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in Daniel's study, surrounded by everything that still smelled like him. Wood, paper, that faint scent of his cologne that lingered in the air. His chair was slightly pushed back, as if he had just stood up and would return any minute. I picked up a photo from the desk. We were younger in it, laughing, standing on a cliff overlooking the ocean during a trip we had taken years ago. One of the few times we had truly allowed ourselves to rest. You always said we had more time, I whispered. The silence answered me. But then another memory surfaced, clear, sharp. Daniel standing in this very room, years ago, dealing with a man who had tried to pressure us into selling the house for far less than it was worth. He had been calm, firm, unmovable. After the man left, frustrated and defeated, Daniel turned to me and said, "Never let anyone rush you into giving up what's yours, Mia. People mistake patience for weakness. Don't let them." I closed my eyes. Claire thought I was weak. Ethan had forgotten who raised him. That realization hurt more than anything. But alongside the pain, something else began to grow. Something steady. Something sharp. The next morning I made my first call. Not to Ethan. Not to Claire. To someone who had known me long before either of them entered my life. "Lena," I said when she answered. "I need your help." She didn't ask questions right away. She never did. "What kind of help?" she asked calmly. "I want to sell the house." Silence. Then, "Are you sure?" I looked around the kitchen. The walls we had painted ourselves. The table where we had celebrated birthdays, holidays, ordinary days that now felt priceless. "Yes," I said, but quietly, quickly, and without anyone knowing. Lena exhaled slowly. "All right. Then we do it your way." That afternoon, Ethan texted me. "We're coming by tonight. Claire found some places you might want to look at." Of course she had. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. "That sounds nice." When they arrived, I made sure to look exactly how they expected. Tired. Fragile. A little lost. Claire walked in first, carrying a folder. "I didn't want to overwhelm you," she said sweetly, "but I found some really lovely communities." Communities. Not homes. Not choices. Solution. I sat down slowly, letting my shoulders slump just slightly. "Thank you," I said. Ethan watched me carefully, almost cautiously. Claire handed me the folder. Inside were glossy pages. Smiling Senior. Gardens. Activities. Everything designed to look comforting. Everything designed to remove independence without calling it that. "It's just something to consider," she added. I nodded, blinking as if holding back tears. "Maybe you're right," I whispered. The satisfaction that flickered across her face confirmed everything I needed to know. That night, after they left, I placed the folder on the table. Then I opened my notebook, and I started writing. Dates, words, expressions, every detail. Not because I needed proof for anyone else, but because I needed to remember the truth. Because when the time came, I wasn't going to hesitate. I stood in the middle of the house one last time that night, looking around at everything Daniel and I had built. "They think I'm done," I said quietly. For the first time since his death. I smiled. "They're wrong." The next 2 weeks became a performance. I learned quickly that grief, when worn correctly, made people underestimate you. It softened their perception, dulled their suspicion, and most importantly, it made them talk more freely. Claire, especially, seemed to relax around me the more fragile I appeared. She mistook silence for surrender. That was her first mistake. I stopped correcting her when she made small comments about the house. I stopped reacting when she pointed out things that needed updating. I even began asking questions, careful, measured ones, that encouraged her to reveal more than she intended. "So, what happens in those communities?" I asked one afternoon when she stopped by unannounced, holding yet another brochure. Her face lit up immediately, like she had been waiting for this moment. "Oh, it's wonderful, Mia. You'd have everything taken care of, meals, cleaning, transportation. You wouldn't have to worry about anything." Anything. I nodded slowly, as if considering it deeply. "And the house?" Ethan shifted slightly in his chair, but Claire answered without hesitation. "Well, once you're settled, we can figure that out. It's too much for you alone, anyway." "We. Not you. Not me. We." I smiled faintly, and looked down at my hands. I suppose that makes sense. And just like that, she leaned further in. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, everything was moving faster than they could imagine. Lena had arranged private showings. No signs. No listings online. Only discreet buyers, serious ones. People who didn't need convincing. I made sure I was never home when they came. Visiting a friend, I'd tell Ethan. Trying to get out of the house, I'd add, just to make it believable. He seemed relieved every time I said that, like he thought I was slowly detaching. Like their plan was working. It would have been almost amusing if it didn't hurt so much. Because despite everything, he was still my son. And every time he avoided looking me in the eyes, every time he let Claire speak for both of them, something inside me cracked just a little more. But I didn't stop. I couldn't afford to. The first offer came sooner than expected. Lena sat across from me at the small cafe on Maple Street, sliding the folder toward me. Full price, she said quietly.
Cash.
Quick closing. I stared at the number. It wasn't just money. It was decades. Memories.
Time.
Tell me about them, I said. Young couple, Lena replied. 2 kids. They loved the garden. Said it feels like a real home. That settled it. Daniel would have liked that. I signed the papers with a steady hand.
No hesitation.
No second thoughts. Just a quiet, final decision. That same day, I made another one. I drove out to a small neighborhood about 20 minutes away. It wasn't as grand, not as familiar, but it had something my old house no longer could give me.
Peace.
The cottage was modest. 1 floor. Sunlight pouring through wide windows. A small garden in the back, already blooming with early flowers. It didn't carry the weight of my past. And for the first time, that felt like freedom instead of loss. I'll take it, I told the agent. By the end of the week, everything was in motion. Sale in progress. New home secured. And one more thing. Something I hadn't allowed myself to consider until now. I sat at my desk, staring at the travel website on my laptop. Daniel and I had always talked about it, always postponed it. Next year, we would say, there's time. There wasn't.
But there was still now.
My finger hovered for only a second before I clicked. A 3-week cruise. Ocean view. Departure. The day after closing. I leaned back in my chair, letting out a slow breath. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was reacting. I was choosing. Of course, they didn't know any of this. To them, I was progressing exactly as expected. Mom, we booked a tour, Ethan said one evening over the phone. For that place Claire mentioned. Sunridge Estates, Claire added in the background, her voice bright. You're going to love it. I closed my eyes briefly, then softened my voice. That sounds nice. Saturday morning, Ethan said. We'll pick you up. No need. I replied gently. Why don't you come here first? We can have breakfast together. There was a pause. Claire answered. That's perfect. Saturday arrived with clear skies. I took my time getting ready. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to. I chose a dress I hadn't worn in years. Elegant. Simple. Strong. I did my hair. Put on light makeup. Even added a necklace Daniel had given me long ago. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a grieving widow. I saw someone who had made a decision. They arrived exactly on time. Claire walked in first, carrying pastries. Ethan followed, looking slightly confused. You look, he started. Different. I offered. He nodded. Good, he said quietly. Claire's smile was tighter. Well, she said, setting the box down, we should probably keep things comfortable today. It might be a long visit. I'm quite comfortable, I replied. We sat at the table. Coffee was poured. Small talk began. But Claire didn't wait long. She never did. So, she said, opening her folder again, I spoke to the director personally. They're expecting us. It's really a wonderful place, Mia. You'll have everything you need. I let her speak. I let her explain. I let her build the future she had already decided for me. And then, when she finally paused, I set my cup down. Calmly. I won't be needing that. Silence. Ethan blinked. What do you mean? I looked at him, then at her. I've already made arrangements. Claire frowned. What kind of arrangements? I reached beside me and picked up a folder. Not hers.
Mine.
I sold the house. Everything stopped.
The air. The sound.
Even their breathing seemed to pause. You what? Ethan said slowly. I sold the house. I repeated. The closing is in 3 weeks. Claire's face drained of color. You can't just do that, she said sharply. Without talking to us. I didn't realize I needed permission. I interrupted calmly. Ethan stood up halfway, then sat back down again, clearly disoriented. Mom, why would you do that? I held his gaze. Because I heard you. That was enough. He knew. Claire didn't speak. For once, she had nothing ready. And, in that silence, everything shifted. I leaned back slightly, watching them both. You thought I didn't notice, I continued quietly. You thought I was too overwhelmed, too broken to understand what was happening. Ethan shook his head quickly. No, that's not. I heard you at the funeral, I said. That stopped him. Completely. Claire's jaw tightened. You misunderstood, she began. No, I said. I understood perfectly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. You were planning my future, I continued. Without me in it. Silence again. Heavy this time. Unavoidable. For the first time since Daniel died, I felt in control. Not angry. Not desperate. Just clear. And unshakable. I stood up slowly.
There's more, I said.
And this time, they were the ones who looked unsure. There's more, I repeated, and this time I didn't sit back down. I stayed standing, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make them uncomfortable.
It wasn't cruelty.
It was clarity. For weeks I had listened, observed, and stayed quiet. Now it was their turn. Ethan looked like he was trying to find the right words, but nothing came. Claire, on the other hand, recovered faster.
She always did.
What else could there possibly be? She asked, folding her arms. The softness in her voice was gone now. No more performance. I opened the folder in my hands and placed a few papers on the table, sliding them toward them. I've purchased a new home, I said calmly. A small cottage. Closing is already in process. Ethan stared at the documents like they might rearrange themselves into something less real. You already bought another house? Yes. But why would you? He stopped himself, frustrated. Why didn't you tell us? I held his gaze. Because you didn't ask me what I wanted. You told me what I needed. That landed. Harder than anything else I had said so far. Claire scoffed softly. We were trying to help you. No, I replied, meeting her eyes directly. You were trying to control the situation. Her expression sharpened. That's not fair. What's not fair? I said, my voice steady but colder now, is planning to move me out of my own home while pretending it's for my benefit. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, clearly overwhelmed. Mom, please, we didn't mean it like that. I didn't respond immediately. I let him sit with it. Let him hear how weak that sounded. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out the small notebook. I wrote things down, I said. Claire's eyes narrowed. What is that? A record, I answered. Of everything you said. Every suggestion. Every visit. Ethan looked at me, confused. Why would you do that? Because I needed to be sure I wasn't imagining it, I said quietly. That I wasn't overreacting. That what I heard was real. I flipped it open and read, not dramatically, not loudly, just plainly. March 12th. Claire mentions I shouldn't be living alone anymore. Suggests something more appropriate. I turned a page. March 15th. Ethan brings up maintenance issues with the house. Says it's too much for one person. Another page. March 18th. First brochure appears. Claire says, once you're settled, we can finally make this place functional. I closed the notebook. That was 3 days after the funeral. The silence that followed was suffocating. Ethan looked like he wanted to disappear. Claire looked like she wanted to fight. You've been spying on us, she said sharply. I've been protecting myself, I corrected. She leaned forward. From your own family? Yes, I said simply. That was the moment something in her snapped. This is unbelievable, she said, standing abruptly. We are the only people looking out for you, and this is how you repay us? I didn't move. I didn't ask you to look out for me, I said. Ethan stood as well, but slower, caught between us. Claire, just sit down for a second.
No, she snapped.
I'm not going to sit here and be accused of something ridiculous. It's not ridiculous, I said, still calm. It's accurate. Her eyes flashed. You're grieving. You're confused. You're making impulsive decisions. That almost made me smile. Selling a house, buying another, arranging my future, quietly, carefully, legally. That's not confusion, I said. That's planning. Ethan looked between us, his voice strained. Mom, why didn't you just talk to us? I finally turned fully toward him. I tried, I said softly. Every time you came over, I waited. I waited for you to ask me how I felt, what I wanted, what I needed. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. But you didn't, I continued. You talked about logistics, about solutions, about what should happen next. My voice didn't rise, but it grew heavier. You stopped seeing me as your mother and started seeing me as a problem to solve. That broke through. I saw it in his face.
Guilt.
Real, undeniable guilt. Claire saw it too, and she didn't like it. This is emotional manipulation, she said quickly. You're twisting everything to make us look like villains. I shook my head slowly. You did that yourselves. She laughed bitterly. Oh, please. You think you're some kind of victim here? No, I said. I think I'm someone who refused to be one. That ended it. For her. She grabbed her bag, her movement sharp and controlled. I'm not staying here for this. Ethan looked at her. Claire. No, she said firmly. If you want to sit here and be blamed for everything, that's your choice. I'm done. She turned and walked toward the door, then stopped, looked back at me. You're making a huge mistake, she said. I met her gaze without hesitation.
No.
I'm correcting one. She left without another word. The door closed harder than necessary, and just like that, the room felt different. Quieter, more honest. Ethan didn't move for a while. He just stood there, staring at the table, like he was trying to piece together something he should have understood long ago. I didn't realize, he finally said.
No, Iraplía.
You didn't. He sat back down slowly, his shoulders heavier than I had ever seen them. I thought we were helping, he said. I thought I was doing the right thing. I studied him carefully. For the first time, I wasn't looking at him as my child. I was looking at him as a man who had made choices. You weren't thinking about me, I said. You were thinking about what was easiest. He winced slightly. That's not true, he said, but there was no conviction behind it. Isn't it? I asked. He didn't answer. Because he couldn't. We sat in silence for a while. Not uncomfortable. Just real. Finally, he looked up. What happens now? He asked. I took a slow breath. Now, I said, I finish what I started.
He nodded faintly.
And us. That question lingered longer than anything else that day. I didn't answer right away, because the truth deserved honesty. Now we see, I said quietly, if there's still something worth rebuilding. He left shortly after. Not angry, not defensive, just quiet. And that, more than anything, told me something had shifted. That evening, my phone didn't stop ringing.
Claire.
Again, and again, and again. I didn't answer. Then messages started coming in. First controlled, then frustrated, then sharp, finally angry. Accusations.
Blame.
Claims that I had destroyed everything. I read them all, then deleted them, one by one, without replying, because this was never about winning. It was about drawing a line. And for the first time in my life, I didn't step back from it. I stood alone in the house that night, boxes already beginning to fill the corners, the past slowly being packed away. But I didn't feel empty. I didn't feel lost. I felt ready for whatever came next. The days that followed felt strangely calm. Not because everything was resolved, far from it, but because the tension that had been building quietly beneath the surface was finally out in the open. There was no more pretending, no more polite conversations layered with hidden intentions. What remained was truth, and truth, even when uncomfortable, is far easier to live with than illusion. I threw myself into the process of leaving. Not escaping, leaving. There's a difference. Escaping is driven by fear. Leaving is driven by decision. And every box I packed, every drawer I emptied, every photograph I carefully wrapped felt less like loss and more like movement.
Forward, not backward.
Lena came by almost every day, sometimes with paperwork, sometimes just with coffee and quiet company. She didn't ask unnecessary questions. She didn't offer pity. She simply helped, and that kind of presence was more valuable than any words. You're handling this better than most people would, she said one afternoon as we sorted through old kitchen items. I smiled faintly. I'm not sure that's true. It is, she insisted. Most people either freeze or they give in. You did neither. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I held a small ceramic bowl in my hands, the one Daniel had once tried to fix after dropping it. The crack was still visible, uneven but carefully glued. I think I just reached a point where I couldn't pretend anymore, I said quietly. She nodded. That tends to change everything. Ethan didn't come by for 3 days after that morning. No calls. No messages. At first, I told myself it didn't matter. That space was necessary. That we both needed time to think. But I would be lying if I said I didn't notice. If I didn't feel it. Because no matter what had happened, he was still my son. On the 4th day, he showed up. Alone. I was in the garage when I heard the door open. I turned, half expecting Claire to be behind him out of habit, but she wasn't. He looked different. Not physically. But there was something in the way he stood. Less certain. Less guarded. Hey, he said quietly. Hello, Ethan. His eyes moved around the space. The boxes, the partially packed shelves, Daniel's tools still neatly arranged where he had left them. You've started already, he said. Yes. He nodded slowly, then stepped further inside. I wasn't sure if you'd want to see me. I wiped my hands on a cloth and set it aside. That depends. On what? On whether you came here to talk, or to convince me I'm wrong. He exhaled, almost relieved. To talk. I studied him for a moment, then nodded toward the workbench. All right. We stood there for a second, neither of us quite sure where to begin. It was him who spoke first. I've been thinking about what you said, he admitted. about not asking you what you wanted. I crossed my arms lightly. And you're right, he said, the words clearly difficult for him. I didn't. Silence settled between us again, but it was different this time. Less defensive, more honest. I thought I was helping, he added, but I never actually asked if you needed help.
No, I said.
You didn't.
He nodded, accepting it.
I let Claire take the lead, he continued. I told myself it was because she's better with planning things, organizing, but really I think I just didn't want to deal with it. That was the first truly honest thing he had said, and I saw it the moment he realized it himself.
You avoided it, I said.
Yeah, he admitted. I did. We moved slowly through the garage as we talked. He picked up one of Daniel's tools, a worn hammer, and turned it in his hands. I haven't been in here in years, he said. I know. He gave a small, almost embarrassed smile. He used to try to get me to help him out here.
He wanted to teach you, I said.
I know, Ethan replied softly. I just never made time. That sentence carried more weight than he probably intended, because it wasn't just about the garage, or the tools, or even Daniel. It was about everything. Time not given, moments not noticed, relationships taken for granted until they started slipping. I don't want to lose you, he said suddenly. The words came out quickly, like he had been holding them in. I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time in a long while, I saw my son. Not the version shaped by Claire's influence, not the one who avoided difficult conversations, but the one who used to sit at this very workbench, watching his father with quiet admiration. You won't, I said. Relief flickered across his face, but I wasn't finished. Unless you keep making the same choices. That stopped him. I don't know how to fix this overnight, I continued. And I'm not asking you to. But if we're going to have any kind of relationship moving forward, it has to be built on respect. He nodded immediately. It will be. Not just for me, I added. For yourself. That seemed to hit deeper than anything else. He stayed that afternoon. Not out of obligation. Not out of guilt. But because he chose to. We worked side by side in the garage, sorting through tools, deciding what to keep, what to donate, what to carry into whatever came next. At one point, he found an old wooden box Daniel had made years ago. I remember this, he said, brushing dust off the surface. He gave it to you, didn't he? I nodded. On our anniversary. Ethan opened it carefully. Inside were small things, notes, photographs, little pieces of a life built over decades. He closed it gently. He was really something, he said. Yes, I replied. He was. We didn't say anything else for a while. We didn't need to. When evening came, he helped me carry a few boxes inside. At the door, he hesitated. Can I come back tomorrow? He asked. It was such a simple question, but it meant everything. Yes, I said. And I meant that too. After he left, I walked through the house slowly. Rooms that once felt heavy now felt transitional, like they were preparing to let me go. Or maybe I was finally ready to let them. Later that night, my phone buzzed. A message from Claire. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won. You think you've won something. You haven't. This isn't over. I stared at the screen for a moment. Then I locked the phone. No response. No reaction. Because for the first time, her words didn't reach me. The next morning I woke up early. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, soft and warm. I made coffee, sat by the window, and for the first time since everything had begun, I didn't feel like I was bracing for something. I felt steady, grounded,
certain.
Whatever came next, I was ready for it. The closing day came faster than I expected, not because time had sped up, but because I had stopped resisting it. When you finally decide to move forward, Everything seems to align with that decision. Papers get signed, boxes get sealed, rooms empty out until they echo in a way that feels unfamiliar. That morning, I walked through the house one last time, not to say goodbye, but to acknowledge it. The kitchen where decades of ordinary mornings had quietly built a life. The hallway marked with small imperfections from years of living, not just existing. The living room where laughter, arguments, celebrations, and silence had all coexisted. And Daniel's study. I lingered there the longest. His chair was gone now, packed carefully into one of the moving trucks waiting outside. The desk was empty, the shelves cleared, but somehow the room still felt like him. "All right," I said quietly, standing in the doorway. "We're done here."
There were no tears this time.
Just a steady breath. And then I turned away. Lena was waiting outside when I stepped out onto the porch. "All set?" she asked. I nodded. "Keys," she added. I reached into my pocket, feeling the familiar weight for the last time. Then I placed them in her hand. "That's it," I said. She gave me a small smile. "That's it." Behind us, the movers were finishing up. The truck doors slammed shut with a heavy finality. And just like that, it was no longer my house. I didn't look back when we drove away. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't need to. The cottage felt different the moment I stepped inside. Lighter, quieter. Not empty, just untouched by everything that had come before. My furniture was already arranged, just as planned. The sunlight poured into the small living room, warming the wooden floors. Boxes were stacked neatly, waiting to be unpacked, but they didn't overwhelm the space the way they would have in the old house. Everything here felt manageable, intentional.
"Mine."
"This suits you," Lena said, setting my bag down near the door. I looked around slowly. "Yes," I said, "it does." That evening, after Lena left, I did something simple. I unpacked one box. Not everything, just one. Inside were a few essentials and the wooden photo frame of Daniel and me from years ago. I placed it on the small table by the window. Not in a position of dominance. Not as a shrine. Just as part of the room. As part of my life. "New place," I said quietly. "You complain about the size." I smiled faintly. "And then you'd fix everything anyway." The next morning, I left for the cruise.
No hesitación.
No second thoughts. Just a suitcase, a ticket, and a decision I had already made. The ocean has a way of putting things into perspective. Standing on the deck, watching the endless horizon stretch in every direction, I realized how small everything had felt before. Not unimportant, but contained, bound to walls, expectations, roles I had lived in for so long I forgot they were choices. Out here, there was none of that, just space.
And time.
I met people I never would have crossed paths with in my old life. A retired teacher traveling alone for the first time. A quiet man who had lost his wife 5 years earlier and was only now learning how to fill his days again. A group of women who laughed loudly, unapologetically, as if they had nothing left to prove. We shared meals, stories, silences. And slowly, something shifted inside me. I stopped thinking of myself as someone who had lost everything, and started seeing myself as someone who still had something to build. On the 8th day, I turned my phone back on. Messages flooded in. Most of them from Ethan. They were different. Not rushed. Not defensive. Just honest. "I've been thinking a lot. About Dad. About you. About who I've been." I read each one carefully. There were no excuses. No attempts to shift blame. Just reflection. And that mattered. There were messages from Claire too. Very different. Sharp. Accusing. At one point, almost desperate. "You've ruined everything. He barely talks to me anymore. I hope you're happy. I read them once, then deleted them, not out of anger, but because they no longer had a place in my life. One evening, sitting on the balcony of my cabin, I watched the sun sink into the ocean. The sky shifted through colors slowly, gold to orange to deep violet. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to peace. Not complete, not permanent, but real. I thought about Ethan, about the boy he had been, the man he was becoming, and the space between those two versions. I knew things wouldn't fix themselves overnight. Trust doesn't return just because someone asks for it. It rebuilds quietly, slowly, through actions, through consistency, through time. I thought about Claire too, not with anger, not anymore, but with clarity. Some people don't change because they don't see a reason to. Others don't change because they don't know how. And some only change when they lose control. When the cruise ended, I didn't feel like I was returning to something. I felt like I was arriving. The cottage greeted me with quiet familiarity. The air smelled faintly of wood and fresh paint. My plants sat in the window, catching sunlight. Everything was exactly where it should be. That night, I slept deeply.
No restless, no tensión.
Just rest. The next morning, I woke early and made coffee. I sat in the small garden, watching the light move across the flowers. And I realized something simple. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of being alone. Not of making decisions. Not of disappointing people who never truly saw me. My phone buzzed. Ethan. I answered.
Hey, he said.
His voice sounded different. Stronger. Clearer.
Y replía.
There was a pause. I've made some changes, he said. A lot of them. I listened. I moved out, he continued. I'm staying with a friend for now. I needed space. I closed my eyes briefly, not out of relief, but understanding. That sounds like a good decision, I said. It was overdue, he admitted. Another pause. Then more quietly. I want to do better. I didn't rush to respond, because this wasn't a moment for reassurance. It was a moment for truth. Then do better, I said gently.
We talked for a while after that.
Not about the past, not about blame, but about what comes next. When the call ended, I sat there for a long time, listening to the quiet, feeling the weight of everything that had happened, and the space it had created. For the first time, that space didn't feel empty. It felt open. A year changes more than you expect. Not in the dramatic, cinematic way people imagine, where everything is suddenly different overnight, but in quiet, almost invisible shifts that only become clear when you stop and look back. The first few months in the cottage were about adjustment, learning the rhythm of a smaller space, figuring out where things belonged, not just physically, but emotionally. The silence here wasn't heavy like it had been in the old house. It didn't press in on me. It gave me room to think, room to breathe, room to rebuild something I hadn't realized I'd lost myself. I created new routines, simple ones. Morning coffee in the garden, evenings in the sunroom with a book, small walks through the neighborhood where people nodded, smiled, and eventually started to recognize me. It wasn't the life I had before, but it was mine. Ethan kept his distance at first. Not because I pushed him away, but because he finally understood that closeness isn't automatic. It has to be earned, especially after it's been damaged. He called occasionally, not too often, just enough to show he was trying. And when we spoke, something had changed. He listened, really listened, not waiting for his turn to respond, not trying to fix anything, just present. That alone told me more than any apology could. 3 months after I moved, he came to visit. He stood at the door, hands in his pockets, looking slightly unsure, like he didn't quite know if he still belonged there. "Hi," he said. Hi, I replied, stepping aside to let him in. He walked in slowly, taking in the space, the smaller rooms, the sunlight, the simplicity. It's nice, he said. It is, I agreed. We sat in the kitchen just like we used to, but everything felt different.
Not strained. Not awkward.
Just careful. I've been going to counseling, he said after a while. I nodded. I know. I didn't realize how much I avoided things, he admitted. How much I let other people decide for me. I didn't interrupt. I thought keeping the peace was the same as doing the right thing, he continued. But it's not. It just delays the consequences. That was the kind of insight that doesn't come easily. Or quickly. I'm glad you see that, I said. He looked at me then directly.
I'm sorry.
Simple.
No excuses. No justifications.
Just the truth. And that mattered. I believe you, I said. Not, it's okay. Not, it's fine. Because it wasn't. But belief was a start. And sometimes a start is enough. Over the following months, we rebuilt things slowly. Not by pretending nothing had happened, but by doing things differently. He came by occasionally to help with small things, fixing a cabinet, adjusting the garden fence, even planting new flowers with me one afternoon. We talked more. Not just about practical things, but about real things. About Daniel. About regrets. About choices. And sometimes about nothing at all. Those were my favorite conversations. Claire, on the other hand, remained exactly who she had always been. The difference was she no longer had access. I heard about her through Ethan, though he rarely brought her up unless it was necessary. The separation had been difficult. Arguments. Accusations. At one point, even legal involvement, but eventually it settled into something final.
A divorce.
Clean on paper. Messy in reality. The last time her name came up was unexpected. It was almost a year after everything had happened. Ethan was sitting in the sunroom, holding a cup of coffee, when he said, "She reached out." I looked up, and, "She said she's changed," he replied. "That she's been working on herself. That she wants to apologize." I watched him carefully. "And what do you think?" I asked. He shook his head slightly. "I think she misses control more than she misses me." That answer told me everything I needed to know. A week later, I saw her myself. I was in the garden, trimming the rose bushes, cuttings from the old house, now thriving in new soil, when I heard a car pull up. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Some things don't change. I set the shears down calmly and wiped my hands before looking up. Claire stepped out of the car, her usual composure slightly worn at the edges. Not broken, but no longer perfect. "Mia," she said, walking toward me. "Claire." She hesitated for a moment, clearly unsure how to begin. "I wanted to talk," she said. "I assumed you might," I replied. I gestured toward the chair across from me.
Seat. She did.
But not comfortably. "I've had time to think," she began, "about everything that happened." I said nothing. "I realize I may have pushed too hard," she continued. "I thought I was doing what was best." There it was again. That same justification. Just softer. "I'm sure you did," I said calmly. She blinked, thrown off by my lack of resistance. "I wanted to apologize," she added quickly. I studied her for a moment. Then I asked the only question that mattered. "For what exactly?" She hesitated. And in that hesitation, the truth revealed itself. "For how things turned out," she said finally. "Not for what she did. Not for how she treated me. But for the outcome. That told me everything." "I see," I said. Silence settled between us. She shifted slightly in her chair. "I'm going through a difficult time right now. Financially. Personally." Of course she was. "And?" I asked. She looked at me directly now. "I was hoping maybe you could help." There it was. Not change. Not growth. Just a different approach. I almost smiled. Not out of amusement, but out of clarity. You haven't changed, I said gently. Her expression hardened instantly. That's not fair.
No, i replija.
What's not fair is pretending this is about anything other than what you want. She stood abruptly. You're cold. No, I said, standing as well. I'm clear. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Two people who would never understand each other. And didn't need to. I won't be helping you, I said. Her jaw tightened. You think you've won something? I shook my head. This was never about winning. Then what was it about? She demanded. I glanced around the garden, at the roses, at the sunlight, at the life I had rebuilt piece by piece. About not losing myself, I said. She left without another word. And this time, I knew she wouldn't be back. That evening Ethan called. She came by, didn't she? He asked. Yes. I'm sorry. There's nothing to be sorry for, I replied. There was a pause. Then he said, You handled it, didn't you? I smiled slightly. Yes, I said. I did. After the call, I returned to the garden. The air was warm, the light soft, and for a moment I closed my eyes, not to escape, but to feel. A year ago, I thought I had lost everything. My husband, my home, my sense of stability. But standing there, in that quiet space I had made my own, I understood something I hadn't before. Loss doesn't always take everything. Sometimes, it clears the way. I opened my eyes and looked at the roses. Stronger now, rooted,
Alive.
See. I whispered softly, as if Daniel could hear me.
I'm all right.
And for the first time, that wasn't something I was trying to believe. It was something I knew.